Hey, welcome to Right, Wrong, and Indifferent. Thank you for listening and tuning in and subscribing and downloading. Today we're going to be talking about Sean Carroll's podcast, Mindscape, and my feelings on it. Here's a quick little bio on Sean Carroll. He is a theoretical physicist at the California Institute of Technology. He received his PhD from Harvard University. His research focuses on fundamental physics, cosmology, dark matter, space-time symmetries, and the origin of the universe. And recently he has talked about the emergence of complexity and what that kind of means. There's a lot to kind of go over there. We could spend a bunch of different time breaking into each category and talking about why it's important. Sean does a really good job of not being scared to bring discussions to the table. Whenever you look at his podcast, you can find a bunch of different topics and kind of look at how science pertains to those topics depending on who he brings on that day. Some of his guests I know of and some of I've never heard of before, but I believe that Sean does a really good job not only vetting the people before they come on to his podcast to talk, also qualifying what they say and making sure that the person is bringing objective truth to the table, as well as some speculation, because without science, you have to speculate with science. That's literally the nature of the beast. Speculate, come to a conclusion, and see if your theory was right or wrong or not. Some of the episodes you can kind of talk about, some of the stuff that he talks about on his podcast is quantum mechanics, sexuality and truth, humanism, poker, Pluto, jazz, America, DNA, cryptocurrency, language, biology. So you can see he does cover quite a range of topics, and he does so, at least he records about an hour every time at least. Sometimes it goes to about an hour and a half. So whenever you go to the podcast, you're going to find a good hour or so of content there that you can listen to and think about, and whatever it is that you're looking for whenever you're kind of looking into these things. Assuming that if you listen to Sean Carroll's podcast, you already have your own theories about reality and already kind of have your own ideas about reality. If you don't, I can see where it would be hard to understand. The audience for this podcast could be anybody. Now that the internet has made so many things available, our demographics are, even though it seems like they're getting a little bit tighter, it just seems like more people are able to experience different things. So more people are kind of at-home scientists, at-home researchers in their spare time, because they have the ability to do so now at their fingertips, instead of having to go to, say, a library maybe and research. Finding the book you're looking for can be very, very difficult if you're looking for a specific book in mind, especially in today's day and age. I find that is my problem when I'm looking for a book. I can never quite find the one. Nowadays, I just order it online. I don't even go look for it in the store. So the internet is becoming a facet for these resources. The point being, there's no specific audience in mind except for possibly scientific learning-based audience. So there's no demographic I would pick out, or race even, or age group, or sex. It's just anybody who wants to think critically about some things. And I want to be clear when I talk about it, I actually don't always agree with Sean Carroll's views and opinions on things, but I like that he's bringing this type of content that's available to us. It is stimulating conversation, right, wrong, or indifferent. You can listen to it, whether you agree with whoever's saying or not. They're articulate people, and they're making their case for what they've studied and what they believe in. And those values kind of seem to roll into one another, strangely enough. Just kind of a little thought. Pros and cons of this podcast. The pros are science. It's hard to find a strictly science podcast that's gonna have the caliber of guests that Sean's bringing on. I wish, of course, I could bring that type of caliber to a podcast and bring people on that would, could influence the way, not necessarily your opinion, but maybe if you think about something a little bit differently. For example, one of these thoughts experiments that have kind of been going on in science right now is Emergent Theory, which if you're not familiar with, you should look into because it's very fascinating, and it's funny how science kind of comes full circle sometimes when they talk about things. I'll probably have to spend some time on Emergent Theory on my own podcast on why I think it's important to talk about and why I think it's a great theory for the universe, but that's for another day. So the pros, again, he's talking about high caliber people. Content's here, about an hour an episode. So on a drive to work there and back, you can listen to one episode and really get some good thinking in that day. The cons are, although he seems to upload content pretty regularly, there's only about 15 episodes or so, and it's hard to find. Some of the topics just don't do it for me, which is cool. I don't think we all are going to agree on what topics are going to make us think or what we want to listen to, or if we're going to agree with the person, or even if we're just going to enjoy listening. I don't always get that from Sean Carroll's Mindscape, due to the fact, I think, just because of the overall almost saturation of topics. So it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see where the podcast goes in the future. Once he reaches the 100 episode kind of landmark, it'll be easier to hammer down kind of the direction of the podcast. But right now you can tell that Sean's just bringing people on. He's having good conversation and he's providing good content, which I really, really appreciate. So thank you, Sean, and shout out to Sean if he wants to come on my podcast. I'll be more happy to interview him. I appreciate everything he does, and when he goes on to other podcasts and speaks, he's always very articulate. Another con would just be a general lack of content at this point. He only started 3 months ago, so 15 episodes is all he has. That's fine. No worries, Sean. Keep up the good work. You're a full-time professor grad, so I think that he's probably pretty busy doing other shit. But expressing yourself and articulating this to the world freely is great. So thank you for that, Sean. That is something that is hard to come by. Solid information. I like Sean a lot. I'll often reference Sean first or specifically whenever I'm looking for different types of theories. He is probably the most vocal scientist in the sense that he will not. Neil deGrasse Tyson comes in mind when you think about famous scientists. I'm trying to discern the difference between Sean and Neil, because there's things I like and don't like about both of them when they're speaking in public. What I like about Sean is that he will tell you his opinion, and he will also speak in what he believes is objective fact and why that objective fact challenges his own opinions. I don't necessarily see the same thought process from Neil. Not that he's not a great scientist or doesn't have his own thought process. He definitely does. And again, a whole nother conversation on that guy. But the way Sean goes about it I find is a little bit more personally stubborn. Which is okay, which is fine. He's an educated person, and the difference between being humble and confidence, it's hard to find the balance between the two when you are a professional in the field. So I imagine he gets on specific topics and has almost like a fixed notion of what he's already going to say. He basically already kind of has it in his head. And when he gets on these type of thoughts, he tends to hold on to them longer than I believe he should. And that's probably the only really con I have about Sean Carroll, because I have seen him change his mind and I have seen him bring new evidence to the table. But when I look back about the things I've researched and looked into, in my own opinion, which, by the way, doesn't nearly hold the same amount of credibility as Sean does. Oh my gosh, he is far, far more intelligent, has way more experience in these things. This is just my own opinion. Is he sometimes closes his thoughts off to new ideas because he thinks he's got it. And right now, with the nature of the universe and things that we're starting to learn and experience, that mindset is just being shattered for a numerous different reasons. Biggest one being that I feel like we've reached a paradigm in science where our human reality and our human vocabulary and our human awareness, science is just beyond that now. So even the words that we use to articulate quantum mechanics, anything that's really beyond our realm, we always apply our own perception and bias to, which is hard to get over. It's hard to accept the fact that what you understand as reality and what you believe is a truth of reality may not. It's an interesting time that we're in right now in science, and I think that's one reason why you see a lot of distrust in people, because it does take a certain amount of mental capacity and mental commitment. It's really a commitment to challenging your own ideas and strengthening your mind, so whenever your biases and things come into play, you can identify those more clearly. Honestly, I can't speak for Sean specifically, and he would probably disagree with me. But I feel like he definitely is growing in the right directions as far as his theories and his thoughts on the universe. I also feel like he's a scientific leader that we need in science right now. He is somebody who needs to continue to develop content, needs to continue to challenge the status quo, and needs to continue to approach things the way he does. Although I do have my own personal objection to these types of things. Objections to the way that Sean goes about these things, but I just think, again, it's my own block that I have, per se, more than it is him. So thank you, Sean. Keep up the good work. I am a fan of your podcast. I listen to every episode. Keep it up, man. I'm very impressed, and you inspire me to go out and challenge the status quo and have these conversations with people and challenge people's thoughts on these things, because we did watch a documentary once, and the guy and the narrator said this, and this is how we really connected with that for some reason, and we've dug our heels deep in it. This is the idea of how things came to be, which the more we know, the more we don't know, is what it seems. Thank you so much for your time. I would love to hear what you have to say about this podcast, or any questions you have for Sean or for me. Please email me at rightwronginfo@gmail.com. Subscribe to me on YouTube, iTunes, and Google Play. What are your opinions on this? What are your opinions on Sean's podcast? I want to know. Shoot me an email, and I'll be happy to converse with you on these things. If you have any questions or you'd like to ask me anything, I'm here for you. I will answer your questions. Thank you so much. You guys have a great day.